Hello from Intellipaat, guys. The topic for today is AWS Glue. But before we actually begin, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click on that bell notification icon, never to miss out on any updates from us. Without any further ado, let us get into the video. So firstly, we need to understand what the ETL concept is. So in order to understand what AWS Glue is, which is an ETL tool, we need to understand what ETL means in the first place and what is the utility of ETL. Another thing to note, guys, we're also going to be implementing a hands-on with AWS Glue on the AWS platform. So stick around for that till the end of the video. Okay, so let us understand what ETL is. ETL is a data integration process where three interrelated steps are existing. So the first step is extract, the second step is transform, and the third step is load, right? So these have to be followed in a sequence. These are the three parts of the ETL process. But what do they achieve? So they achieve a data warehousing. So the primary function is to build a data warehouse or any data construct which provides a combined view of data from multiple sources, right? To elaborate on this, imagine you're working for an e-commerce organization as a data analytics expert, and you're working with AWS Glue or any other ETL tool or data warehousing tool. You'll have multiple data sources. So, for instance, Amazon has a customer data source, and Amazon has a sales data, obviously. So these are two separate data sources, right? But for a person who's sitting on a managerial position, or a person who needs to get insights from a combined aggregate of all of this data, right? He will not be dealing with these two data sets separately. So your job would be to combine those two data sets, right? Your job is to combine the important aspects of those two data sets using an ETL process or an ETL tool and putting that combined view or the combined analytics into a data warehouse. Now, data warehouse is a common place where the data is stored, and then you can use it for further insights. You can create charts out of it, you can create graphs out of it, and you can show it to your boss, you can show it to the sales team or the marketing team, so the people with the non-technical expertise can also understand what is going on with the data. To further elaborate on the ETL process, right, we need to look at the workflow as well. Imagine you have three separate data sources. So one is coming from an RDBMS server, one is coming from an SQL server, one is coming from actual files present on some hard drive or SSD, right? So these are the three data sources that you have currently. So the first step is obviously extract, right? So the first step in your ETL tool would be to extract this data into a staging area, right? So what does this staging area essentially do? Once the data has been extracted and put into the staging area, then you're going to be cleaning and processing it essentially. So that means that the data might have some inconsistencies in it, might have some noise in it, might have a different format, right? And it's coming from three different data sources. For instance, the data files that are coming in could be of JSON format. The SQL server is obviously giving data in an SQL format, in a structured format. In the staging area, when you're creating a combined view for a data warehouse, you need to make sure that all of this data is in a singular format and in an SQL format, preferably, and the data is essentially cataloged, right? So the next step becomes the transformation process, right? So the transformation process refers to when you're cleaning the data after the extraction and you're basically coordinating all of the data types that are there in the data and the data formats that are there, and you're cataloging the data. Then obviously you have the load. So the load comes in when all of the transformations have been done, and the next step is to put all of that transformation and the data that has been transformed into a data warehouse. So this is what the ETL tool does. It takes the data from the data source and puts it into a data warehouse after it has transformed it. So now that we understand the ETL workflow, let us look at the advantages of data warehousing, because the entire aim that we have with using ETL is to create a data warehouse. So the question obviously comes up, why are we so inclined to data warehouse? What are the advantages of it? So the first thing is high scalability. High scalability implies that if the data is extremely large in nature, extremely large in volume, maybe coming in continuously, and has been collected from multiple sources, could be of multiple file formats, right? Uh, Data warehousing gives us an option to basically increase or decrease the size of that data at will, right? We don't have to worry about the hardware resources, particularly when we're dealing with this particular aspect, because data warehousing is a process where you're not actually transferring the data from the actual source to a target. What you're doing in data warehousing is you're keeping the data at the location it is, so you're not transferring it, and you're performing all your queries on the cataloged version of that data, right? So that brings us to the second point. The second point is it increases the speed and efficiency of your data analytics process, right? So since there is no input output delay particularly, you're only fetching the cataloged information, you're only fetching the metadata of the data, and then you're performing your queries on the source itself. This efficiency and speed of this particular aspect is extremely good because there is no transfer that is happening. And finally, you get the combined view of data. So for people who are coming from a non-technical background, or for people who are creating data visualizations, right? Having that combined and aggregate view of data is extremely important, because you cannot have five different data sources and then you can try to visualize it or show it to anybody. Nobody will understand the meaning of what you have found or what your analytics model has been. So you need to combine all of it together to be able to query it in a convenient fashion. So that also brings us to our tool that we are going to be using today. There are many data warehousing and ETL tools out there, but AWS Glue is particularly suited for big data, right? So what is AWS Glue? AWS Glue is a fully managed extract, transform, and load ETL service. As we discussed earlier, that makes it easy for customers to prepare and load their data for analytics, right? So that is pretty straightforward. It is especially suited for big data because with Amazon, you get a cluster-based computing system, right? You can deploy a lot of resources for your ETL service. So you can increase the speed of your service or decrease the speed of your service at will, depending on the workload with the amount of resources that you've allocated to it. You don't have to have any local hardware particularly to be able to run Glue. So what are the benefits of Glue? The first is easy management. Because Amazon manages almost everything for you, it has the options for you to allocate the specified amount of resources that you want to specify for your ETL job, not more, not less, right? And you can scale that up and scale that down pretty easily. Any other issue, Amazon manages all of the updates, all of the security patches, all of the version upgrades. You don't have to deploy any maintenance or administrative engineers for that, right? So the cloud's computing system makes it really easy for you to be able to data warehouse and use your ETL tools with it. Next up, it's cost efficient. So Amazon is one of the cloud services that comes at really affordable rates, right? It's also cost efficient because you only pay for as much of the resources that you're using, right? If you have a server in your own office space, if you have a computer that is entirely dedicated to that, you still have to keep that running all the time, and you have to pay rent for it. You have to pay the administrative team for it, the maintenance team for it, right? In Amazon's case, everything is managed, and you don't have to pay anybody anything for it, and you're not renting anything. You only have to pay for the exact percentage or the amount of resources that you use for when you use it. So that is why it's cost efficient as well. Then we have superior functionality. So with AWS Glue, you not only get the primary benefits of ETL tools, you also get superior functionality because it's easily integratable with big data. It's easily integratable with other services as well, other cloud and offline services and third-party services as well. Because Amazon, as an organization, aims to provide compatibility with a lot of things that you would do in your data analytics or your data science career. And it also aims to provide organizations with the most affordable and reliable cloud service there is. So let us look at the glue workflow as well before we actually get to the tutorial. So say you have some data present in your Amazon S3 bucket. Amazon S3 is a data storage service in AWS. And then you take some data using AWS Glue crawlers. Now, crawlers are mini services present within AWS Glue that scan your data set, right? They scan your data set. They generate the metadata out of that data set, right? They catalog that data, and they also create a virtual database out of this catalog data, right? So you have generated your AWS Glue data catalog after that point, right? That is the second step, right? It serves as a central metadata repository, and then you can use this repository for a various plethora of services, right? Now that your data has been cataloged, it has been transformed after your Glue service has ran on it. You can then integrate it with other AWS services like Amazon Athena, which is an actual data warehousing service. Amazon Redshift, same. You can use it with Amazon EMR as well with, say, Hive, right? So these are the three services that you can use it with, and there are other services as well. And then once you have warehoused that data, you can essentially use your data visualization tools with it. So Amazon QuickSight is a data visualization tool that is present in the AWS services, so you can integrate it with your data warehousing. The part that I want you to focus on particularly here are these two blocks, right? So this is the task of AWS Glue, which is the ETL task. And then from then on, these are the data warehousing services. This is the data visualization tool, and this is the storage service. So let us go to the Glue demo that we have for today. We are going to be crawling some data out of Amazon S3, and then we are going to be putting it back into Amazon S3 after we've cataloged it, whatever we have cataloged, and however we have transformed it. So we are currently in the AWS management console. AWS provides a very convenient console for you to select your services from. So the first thing that I want to do is upload my data set actually. So I'm going to be selecting Amazon S3, right? So this is essentially like your Google Drive, right? If you want to store extremely large data sets, you can go for the paid version of it. But if you want to store small things, the default free tier version works as well. You don't have to pay anything for storing small data sets, right? So the first thing that I would do is create a bucket. So in this bucket, since I don't want to deal with permissions specifically right now, I'm going to be allowing all public access. So the first thing that I would do is call my bucket something. So let us call this YouTube Live Glue, right? Let us call it that. Maybe that name has been taken, but we'll see. And then untick this, which is block all public access. I acknowledge that. It'll ask you for a waiver. And then we will click on create bucket, right? So that name wasn't taken and we have created that bucket, which is publicly accessible in this particular scenario, right? So this is our bucket. We go into that, we create two folders that we're going to be using. So the first folder that we're going to be using is the input folder where we're going to be uploading our data set. We'll create that. And the second folder that we'll be creating is the output folder. And we'll create that as well, right? We have two folders now. In the input folder, we'll be uploading our data set. So we'll click on upload and go to add files. And then we can select anything. So let us go for the taxi cab data that we have, the yellow.csv. It's of 1.4 MB, right? And then we're going to be clicking on upload. So it got uploaded. Now it's there present in our folder. So if I look at the folder again, we have the input and we have our yellow.csv within the input folder. Now the AWS task is done for now. This S3 task is done. So I'll go to Glue now. So I'll open up AWS Glue, right? First, I'll delete any databases that I already have to avoid any sort of conflict. And I'll delete my job as well, right? Then I'll go to crawlers. So this is the part where we're actually basically picking that data up from S3. So we'll delete this pre-existing crawler, go to add crawler and create a new crawler. So let us call this YT Live Glue and click on next. We are going to be choosing the source type as data stores, which is in S3. And we're going to be crawling on everything that is present in that particular folder, in that particular directory. Then the data store is S3 and I want to choose a specified path. So the path I'll choose is this particular folder that I had created earlier on, this particular bucket. So once I expand that, I have the option of selecting input, and within input we have alo.csv. We're not going to be selecting that because we could have had multiple data sets, right? In this case, we only have one. But if you have multiple data sets, the best way to go about it is to select the folder that houses your data set rather than selecting the data set itself. And we'll click on next. It is asking us whether we want to add another data store. We don't. So we'll click on no and click on next. And then it is asking us to choose an IAM role. Now in Amazon, there are a lot of permissions that you need to deal with, right? Because data security is a top priority for Amazon. So you need to specify roles for every particular task that you're doing, and it depends on your account privileges, whether you're working as an employee in an organization on their AWS account, and how many permissions you've been assigned, and which services you can integrate with which service. All of these things are dependent on IAM roles. So for this particular purpose, I have created an IAM role already, which gives me access to the Amazon S3 bucket, right? So there will be no permission clashes. And then I'll click on next. I'll select in the frequency tab, I'll select run on demand because I don't want to run this crawler at a periodic level. I only want to run it whenever I click on run. I'll click on next, and then it asks me to create a virtual database. So I'll create one. So let us call this virtual create, and then we'll click on next. So once we have done that, we'll click on finish. So since the crawler is set or to run on demand, it's not actually set to run periodically or automatically. We have to manually start it. So we'll click on the crawler and we'll click on run. Now it is running. It will take some time and then it will create the virtual database with the data cataloged in it. So as we can see now that the data crawler is now stopping, right? And we can see that one table has been added. So it was earlier 0, now it's 1. So we'll wait for it to be ready. And meanwhile, we can also check in the databases. So once we refresh it, we're able to see that a database called virtual has been created. And once we open the virtual database and we click on tables in virtual, we can see that there is one table called input, right? If we open that, we can see that our taxi cab dataset has been accepted and the metadata is obviously there. So we can see that, and we can see the data types for each of the columns. So the next thing that we can do after creating the metadata is actually start our ETL job. So for that, we'll go to the ETL tab over here and we'll click on jobs, right? So there are no jobs that are currently there that we can run. So we'll click on add job, right? So we can call this job anything. So let us call this job YT live job, and we'll choose an IAM role. We'll select the same IAM role. And we can select the technology stack that we want to run this on. So for this particular case, we're going to be using Spark, which is a very prevalent technology in the case of big data. And we're going to be going with Spark with a Python language. So we're going to be using PySpark essentially. And then we have an option of customizing our script. So we can use custom ETL scripts. We're just going to be going with the proposed default script that Amazon gives us, right? And then next up, we will be actually going ahead with the security configurations and actually reducing the number of resources and the amount of resources we're using. So we're going to be putting the worker type to standard, right? Because this is not a memory intensive job. The file is only of 1.4 MB. So we're not actually doing anything very memory intensive. And the number of workers will reduce to 2, right? And the job timeout is 2880 minutes. So this is for industry level job timeout standards. We'll put this to 10 because we're just doing a practice session over here. And then we'll click on next. So next up, we have to select our data source. So in this particular case, our data source is in the input. It's in the input table that we had virtually created, and then we'll click on next, right? And the default option over here is change schema. So we'll go over there and click on next, right? So the target in our virtual database would be input as well because we're going to be changing our input schema. And then it gives us a rundown of how these things look, right? So default in S3, it was detected as big int, but now some things have been by default detected as long. The times have been detected as string values. The passenger count has been detected as long. So all of the data types have been appropriately detected by Amazon itself, but you have the option of adding new columns over here, resetting this to the default values. You can do anything with it. For now, we're just going to go with what Amazon has detected for us. We're going to save job and edit the script. Now, when we get to the edit script part of things, we can see the PySpark code that is going to be extracting, transforming, and loading our data, right? So this is the default script that you're getting with Amazon. You can write your own custom script for it. So I have one that is currently written already. So we're going to be using that in order to store our data, our transformed data, into our S3 bucket, the output folder that we had created earlier on. So I already have my PySpark code written for this. So we have imported a few modules from the AWS Glue package, and we are going to be using them. So first thing that I have specified are the parameters. So the database that I have created is called virtual. The table is input, and the right path is the output folder that we had created in our S3 bucket. So we have to specify all of that. So the first part is obviously extracting the data, right? So this particular function create dynamic frame from catalog. So the data that has been cataloged in our virtual database, we are taking it from there, and then we are essentially extracting it and we are converting it into a data frame. Now data frame is quite similar to an SQL table where you can perform our transformations quite easily. And then we are creating another data frame. We're calling it data frame aggregated. And this particular data that we are creating out of the old data contains the vendor ID, which is the ID of the cab driver, which could be one or two, depending on the type of cab that the person drives. We have the total amount of the fare of the trip, and we're averaging that to the average of the total amount. So we're grouping it by vendor ID, and each vendor ID will display the average total amount and the average trip time taken, right? So these are the two things that we're aggregating essentially. And then we'll get our final data set based on it. And we're also arranging this data frame in the descending order of the average total amount. So whichever vendor ID has the highest average total amount, it'll come at the top of the table. And then finally, after the transformation has been done, the third part, which is loading. So we're essentially putting that data into S3, into the output folder. We're essentially loading it into S3. We can also put it into Redshift or Athena, or we can put it into EMR as well. It is up to us. And the format is CSV again. So I'll copy all of this, right? And then I'll put it instead of this code. I'll select this and I'll remove that and put this code instead of that. And then I'll click on Run Job. So the job is running, as we can see, and it'll take some time. So when we see that the running job process has finished, then we can simply go back to our S3 console. We have two folders. We had the input folder. We'll open up the output folder to see if anything has been created. So we can see that a part file has been generated. It's of 122 bytes, so it means there is something in it. So we'll download this first. So we will click on it and we'll click on actions and we'll click on download as, right? So firstly, we'll click on this and then we'll put it over here in the downloads folder. We'll call it glue output.csv and then we'll click on save, right? So it's automatically saved as an Excel file in the CSV format. We'll open it up. So we can see that the average trip time has been calculated and we have our average total fare as well, and it has been arranged in the descending order. So we have the 16 first and the 15 second. So similar to that, based on the sort of data that you'll have, you can do this in that manner as well. So we can see that we had a data set initially, we transformed it, we have an aggregated data set now. Now we can perform some further analytics with it as well using data warehousing tools. So that is about it for this particular tutorial on Amazon Glue. We can see how easy it makes things and how it could be beneficial in the cases of big data as well. So that is about it for our session here today, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like. You can contact our course advisors who are available 24/7 using the following contact details. If you're interested in technologies like AWS Glue and anything related to big data on AWS, we provide an extensive course for that. So if you're interested in that, you can contact our course advisors or our sales team. And besides that, be sure to sign up for our webinar. We produce videos like this every day. And if you want to ask the trainers or the course advisors live doubts during the sessions, you can opt for our webinars. You can sign up for them. The link has been provided in your YouTube chat box. And that is about it from Intellipaat. Hope you had a wonderful session. Thank you and goodbye.